When you think of fantasy, what comes to mind? I think about movies like Harry Potter and books like Percy Jackson. These were two different giants of the fantasy scene that made up my childhood and many of the children's lives around me. The book fair came around and I always gunned for the Percy Jackson book on the main display. They're still popular today and there's a reason for that. We can debate all day if the story was thought out well or the intended visuals are up to a dazzling standard. But I think one thing we tend to forget in this oversaturated genre is the fascination we once had with any of these magic systems. When I read Percy Jackson, my mind was always trying to anticipate what kind of powers the different gods would give to the characters we were following. It's this fascination that I'm always trying to chase. Back then, I read anything and everything fantasy, from fairy tales to young adult coming of age stories. I found a manga that covers all bases and goes the extra mile when we're talking about fascination. Atelier has a magic system that is wondrous, with plenty of potential for old classics and new creations. It's used as a bargaining chip in negotiations and sealed off away from the common folk, disguised as a power granted by privilege at birth. There's so many paths we can go with this, so let's explore the anime that will revolutionize fantasy. Atelier undermines your baseline for fantasy with the very basis of its power system. In this world, witches cast their magic as if it is an art. It is not just a feeling that you can imagine and send flying out of your fingers. It's not something you can hold with your metaphysical hands. Rather, with their own fingers, these witches draw spell circles that are sparked into reality as the spell closes on the paper with their pen and ink. It is something anyone can do, but few have the privilege of doing. This is where the possibilities branch out with the exclusivity of the craft, the different aspects of the magic witches are able to expand into, and the taboos that come with this creativity. These all play into the plot brilliantly, so let's start with how vast the magic is in this manga. Spellcrafting is a huge topic in this story, with multiple new weaves of magic being debuted every volume. Of course, before this, our characters need to study up on the fundamentals that make all of this possible. From the inside out, spells consist of runes, keystones, and glyphs. Runes are the sigil in the center of the circle and is used to determine the very essence of the spell and the effect that it will pertain to. Outside of that, we have keystones. These sigils determine what direction or size the spell will take or go in, essentially encapsulating the form that it partakes. The glyph is the circle that is drawn to bind together all the sigils, which might seem very monotone in terms of a component, but is very versatile when you look at it in the bigger picture. There are several different iterations of runes that get more detailed as the spell becomes more complex. In terms of keystones, the way that they are drawn and arranged can drastically change the effect of the spell. It is shown with Coco, the main character, and her attempt at the first trial, where she draws an absurdly long keystone across the entire spell in order to manipulate the spell to shoot out one side of the circle, thrusting her in a specific direction. When we look at glyphs, the circle needs to be closed in order for the spell to initiate. Taking advantage of this, witches leave spells nearly complete in the notepad they have in their bodies, waiting for a moment that they require them. When they do, they quickly close the ring in their cloaks and unleash the power within that split second that it takes them to complete it. There's a reason for this, which we'll get into in a little bit. For now, these are the basics of spell casting. Apart from casting, these fundamentals are also important for spell crafting. In Atelier, new spells are being made all the time. They're not drastically radical, like discovering a hidden element in the periodic table, but more so tweaks and alterations made to existing spells. You can craft new spells straight off of the paper that you practice and cast off of. Contraptions also exist in this world, which act as devices that have the spell circles drawn onto them in some sort of fashion. Whether it is a barrel or a cape, spells can be inscribed onto any surface with the help of specialized tools in cases of foundations such as bridges. There might be iterations of these in other manga, anime, novels, and media, but the absolute perfection that Atelier has made within their system is amazing. It truly begs for curiosity when wondering what the characters in the manga are going to create in order to combat their conflicts or difficulties. In this story, the witches make rings that can act as spotlights, giving their position to their allies, boots that have half a spell circle on each side, so when they're put together, the ring activates and it can fly through the air. There's jewelry that when put together, it blasts hot air through the circle in order to dry clothes off quickly. There's multitudes of possibilities and it doesn't stop with just these examples. Atelier exhibits a hard magic system but leaves so much space open for customization. Whether you're only studying and casting or researching and crafting, these witches have an infinite number of paths open for them. Whether they wish to become mentors themselves or open a magic shop for their fellow peers, this magic system allows for self-expression that I have never seen in any other fantasy, truly marking it as an art form rather than a means to an end. It's wonderful that there's so much freedom with this magic, but the downside to this concept is the exclusivity of the system, where witches are few in between and the common person does not hold the knowledge to use it. The reason I say knowledge and not power is because magic is not a divine right. It is a skill anyone can acquire, but that the witches gatekeep in order to keep society a peaceful and serene place. In order to cast the magic, you need a special type of ink, a pen, and the expertise of the runes. When you have these, ease, the wonder of the magic is at your fingertips. Our main character, Coco, is a girl who always wanted to learn about magic and its incredible possibilities. She is granted the grace of having this wish come true, but it is with this that she has been able to experience the dichotomy of society and what magic means for both sides. To commoners, magic is something that is beyond their reach. If something is broken beyond repair, they'd have better luck praying for a miracle than hoping a witch strolls by and is able to fix their problem. While witches have a motto to help any civilian who is in need of assistance, it is still rare for people who lived in the country, just like Coco, to experience the fascination of magic like this. When regular citizens and the underbelly of witches converge together in events such as the festival in the city, Coco gets to see what she had escaped from. The fact that magic needs to be kept secret from them, not only to protect the majority of people, but as something to leverage in certain scenarios, it tears her apart inside seeing children just how she used to be, wishing that they could metaphorically wave their hands around and have the floor under their feet light up as if they were walking on the sun. Having such a beautiful aspect of the world hidden away from most people is something that Coco struggles with accepting as a rule. She wonders, along with some of her friends, about if the way the witches go about their days with the guidelines they have is the correct way to go about conflicts both sides face. While it prevents tragedies, other crises arise as a product of this dynamic. It's a double-edged sword, and this isn't the only issue that comes with hiding magic. Witches are a vital part of society in this world, and they have their own bureaucracy that interacts with the world leaders of the majority of people. Both sides have their officials, and when there's a door that needs opening, these sides come together to figure out if the key is a necessity or if there's another path they can go down. Magic isn't to be used unless entirely necessary. When we're talking about the global level where it can affect kingdoms, magic should be used sparingly because it is not a tool to fix everything like some officials might think it is. Representatives from the witch society must explain this to regular people while suggesting alternative solutions to a problem they are facing. It is a bargaining chip that has to be effectively used. Otherwise, relations between both groups will become lopsided and there will be uneven footing. The dynamics that arise from magic being an exclusive mechanic in this world are complicated and lead to more than just a power imbalance. It stretches characters' patience thin, and interpersonal relationships can tank given enough time and misunderstandings. The magic system in this manga does a good job and not only brings back fascination to the actual craft, but provides more than just battle fantasies with the use of it. Where there are limitations with such a system, there must also be taboos. It's an extra layer of depth added to the dynamics, not only between regular people and witches, but between witches themselves. It takes the tension between groups and strings it between allying individuals. The main conflict in Witch Hat Atelier happens between regular witches, known as the pointed caps, and the evil witches, known as the brimmed caps. Whereas regular witches have rules and guidelines they must follow, which dictates what type of magic they shouldn't use and what studies they shouldn't undertake, brimmed caps do everything in their power to experiment with every facet of their world, from medicine to human transmutation. It is endearing that we have clear good and evil sides from the start. The brimmed caps are almost to a level of cartoonishly evil, but the principles for which they fight for are not black and white as the differing sides might suggest. The pointed caps are always restricted from even thinking about forbidden magic, but much of the dismay that the brimmed caps cause within society could sometimes be repaired with the same magic. While there are workarounds to their problems, it isn't completely safe in the perspective of the rule keepers who safe keep forbidden magic from the clutches of anyone. The consequences for encroaching on these safety lines are detrimental, resulting in the guilty party being erased from the magic world altogether. For the main cast of characters, this brings into question the validity of the rule keepers when they're sworn to their duty and would never look the other way given any kind of circumstance. Even within their own half of the world, the good guys are divided based on their morals. Witch Hat Atelier is amazing at bringing individual character motivations into the picture and pressing it against the frame of the issue. You have the guidelines that are staked into the ground, and our cast has to manage a way to maneuver this ever-confusing maze of moralistic fog. It's not something that magic can alter by grabbing onto it and changing its form. I'm gonna blow your mind with what I'm about to say. Shows like this, shows like Herne, are the most interesting because it presents conflicts that aren't solvable by the magic system. Interpersonal problems, issues of morals and mindsets, and other psychological phenomena are often problems in these critically acclaimed media. In Herne, it is this elf who has more time than possibly imaginable in trying to come to terms with the fact that most of their peers aren't like them in that aspect. This way, she must adapt to a mindset that values time on a human scale so as not to forsake the friends around her and take her allies for granted. In Witch Hat Atelier, the major issue we are struggling with at the current point of the manga is the moral guidelines set in the magic world, and that, while it prevents major calamity from striking, people fall through the cracks all the time, and they would be able to save some of them from plunging into darkness if exceptions were to be made. It's this idea of challenging precedents for the sake of the greater good, but the real issue is not knowing which path is the lesser evil. The magic systems of this anime will revolutionize fantasy shows in the way of fascination, but also beyond that. I find that the best fantasies tackle topics and problems that can't be solved with their magic magic. The system itself is complex and provides more than just wonder. It gives life to social hierarchies and social dynamics that require people to look inwards rather than outwards, much as in real life, we rarely have control over the external issues of society. These shows encourage me to change myself rather than waiting and dreaming for something to come along and change me.